Hello and welcome to the Marketing Maven and More podcast. We're going to dive into the nuts and bolts of marketing and just get real about the highs and the lows of running a business. So I'm your host, Shariq, and I'm ready to spark conversations that matter to you. Business leaders, you can be a business leader, innovator, a thinker. We're here to talk about the things that really stick outside of just marketing, business, and life, which is also very important. And today I'm so excited to have with me today Miss Danielle Detiege. We're going to talk about how to win as an introverted CEO in an extroverted world. So, hello, Danielle.
Hi, Shariq. How are you? I'm so excited to be here to have this conversation.
I am excited to be here too. This is something that, we both have, discussed in the past about this as being a very important topic for us. So, I'm excited to talk today with you about just being an introvert. Both of us come from a corporate background and we branched off from corporate to start our own businesses, but we're still seeing some of the different, I want to say some biases even in this industry
Yes.
where we're just not we notice some differences in the way that we process, and we found a way to kind of activate our superpowers of being introverts and turned it into successful businesses. Okay, so before we get started, I just want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself and tell the audience about who you are.
Okay, so I am Danielle Detiege, or Coach Danni D, and you excellently said that Detiege. Most people will shy away from me.
But with my first name, I can't help it. I'm always very conscious about saying everyone's name correctly.
My running joke is that my husband did that to me. It was Franklin before, and then I got married, and now I have to spell it and pronounce it 12 times. So, Coach Danny D is a little bit easier for most people to
Yes,
to
yes.
remember and say. But I am basically a work with ease coach. I help women to overcome imposter syndrome, detox their calendars, and to create systems so they can run businesses, but also live joyful and fulfilled lives and do their purpose work.
Mhm.
So that's like what makes me tick. That's what makes me, want to get up in the morning and do all the things. Also, wife, mother, dog mom, he may make a cameo appearance. He likes to do that. Uh,
That's fine. That's totally
he is
fine.
one of my coworkers. I consider him one of my coworkers. He's my self-care manager. He reminds me when it's time to take a break, or, when it's
Hmm.
time to apparently flip the laptop over. So that's
Yeah.
his role in the business. I started out in, like you said, I started in corporate. That was my background. I left corporate in 2018 to pursue my first business full time, which is a balloon decor company. We do balloon decor for corporate events.
Hmm.
And then that led me into coaching. And that has always just been something that I was doing without realizing I was doing it. And then I was like, well, I mean, this is what you enjoy doing.
Right.
And I saw how many women were in those spaces where they just needed that extra push to
Mm.
be able to really be successful and believe that they can do it.
Right. Well, that's awesome. I mean, that's something that we all need because, I mean, time management, especially when you're working by yourself, it's so
Yes.
easy to get just lost in time. And so that's a very important thing that you do. All right, so let's get really into the nuts and bolts of what we're here to talk about because I'm really looking forward to just a great introduction. So we're going to go into our expert chat side of this conversation is where we dig into like what you're passionate about. Both of us have talked about how we both evolved as introverts and how both of us had to kind of find our way. So I'll just share, my story. We talked about I went purposely into sales. And because that's probably the last thing that anybody ever expected me to do. My family was
At
like,
all.
"Are
As
you
an introvert, it's like you did
yeah."
what?
They were like, "Are you serious?" I said, "Yes, I'm going into sales as pharmaceutical sales." So while it wasn't a transactional, but it was still promotional, it still required me to have like 8 to 10 conversations with different people every day, all day long. Right. So I had to go to about 8 to 10 different practices, medical practices around. I was in the Huntsville, Alabama area. But I did that because I knew from going through business school and just knowing if I want to be really successful in business, I have to learn how to communicate. I have to be uncomfortable, right? Do something that I'm afraid of and conquer it. So I was able to master it even as an introvert and even excel over a lot of the extroverted coworkers because I found a way to make those sales pitches my own by listening more, by hearing what's not being said, you know what I mean? And catching those undertones and things like that. So talk about how you were able to find those introverted type of superpowers of yours and even what you're doing now and what you used to do.
So yeah, I think that it is one of those things that like we are like, the underdog, so to speak,
Yeah.
in the world of like, introvert of extroverts. But when we couple those extroverted traits with our introverted traits, we are so unstoppable. And I think a lot of times, as introverts, we don't look at um certain skills. Like I might not be the person that wants to pick up a phone and like call somebody, right? That's not the thing that I want to do. And I've set up my business in a way that that works. But like you said, communication, you can't run a business without having communication skills. So I have a lot of automation, a lot of scripts, a lot of things that are a part of my business that have my full heart into them, but don't require me to do those things that make me very uncomfortable, right? So, you have to find, I think for me, I found the sweet spot between like growth and like being inauthentic,
Mhm.
so making sure that I was still being my authentic self, but also I can't hide behind introversion and just decide, well, I'm just never going to talk to nobody ever again. Like that's not an option. And the times when I do have, like, most of my clients prefer email interaction. I deal with a lot of corporate clients, so they're busy. They don't want to get on the phone.
Yeah.
But when I have those clients that want to have those conversations, a lot of times my husband will overhear a conversation. He's like, "Oh my God, you're so good at that. Why do you say you don't like
Right.
enjoy doing that?" But
Hmm.
it is what you said, it's those superpowers of really listening, really hearing what the other person is saying, and sometimes what they're not saying. Or sometimes, I can feel the pause, like I'm like,
Yeah,
wait,
you hear it. Yeah.
wait, there's something that made this person apprehensive just now. So
Right.
now I'm like, okay, what did I just say before that? And then going back and being able to be like, wait, okay, I'm sure you may be concerned about this. Here is the answer to that question. Because sometimes they're not going to ask the question, but they have a question or they have a concern.
Yes.
And introverts, when you are used to being quiet, you sense and feel so much more than the average extrovert, because they're so busy like talking, they're
Hmm.
not hearing what's going on around them.
That is so true. I mean, a lot of times I can tell by the body language, like you're saying, I can tell, okay, and that's when one thing I love to do is ask questions. Because
Hmm.
for me, if I have you talking, now I can basically cater my presentation around what you're saying. So the way I was able to break the ice as a new salesperson and even in season was to start asking questions. What are your biggest, struggles with reps? What's one of the things that reps do that you prefer I not do? And that will open the floodgates. And then I'll ask about my products and things like that. They're more product specific. And I found that they appreciated someone finally asking them questions and trying to get into their heads versus just pulling out the book and the information and just talking. And so, like, even now, my business is like we'll go through our process through our discovery calls, but it has to be collaborative. I have to hear from you too as well. It can't just be me doing all the talking because otherwise, what's the point? And then, questions will linger about, okay, what do they want?
Right.
Otherwise, how do you know what your customer or client wants if you're not actively listening? And that is something that introverts do very well.
Yeah, I think that like, you mentioned superpower. That is like a huge superpower. Especially like as a coach. I have to be able to hear the thing that you are not saying, but that is, on your mind. Like I can, like you said, I can read that body language. Like all of a sudden I said something and you like, and I'm like, nope, we're not retreating into that corner. Come
Yes.
out of the corner. Let's work that out. But you have to be able to listen. And like you said, like you're tailoring what you do to that specific person. And everyone wants to feel seen and
Yes.
everyone wants something to feel personalized. People sometimes will respond to the other way, but they're not feeling good in it. You know what I'm saying? Like they may make the
Yeah.
purchase today, but they're not coming back, or they're bringing it back. And
Yeah.
it's just not. I want I want to make sure when we leave an interaction that I have served you
Exactly.
the way that you needed to be served, not the way that, the next person needs to be served. So I think that that is a very unique tool of introverts. And another thing you said that just, gave me a tip for the audience as far as like I when you mentioned asking the questions, right?
Yes.
That's a tip I give a lot of times in when you go into networking situations
Oh, yeah.
is to ask questions because as introverts, we typically don't like small talk. We
Mm-hmm.
typically
Yeah. I hate it. Oh,
we
gosh.
typically had to like, work our
Yeah.
way up all the way to come to the networking event, right? Like we had to have the hype music. We had to get out, like we
Oh,
then
gosh.
talked
Yeah.
ourselves out of it like 20 times before we got there. And then you get there and it's like, now what?
Right.
But when you put the question on other people
Mm-hmm.
and let them talk, then it gives you an opportunity to like step in and say, oh, well, this person said that
Mm-hmm.
they maybe they write copy. And I'm like, well, I know Sharik and she does like, web design and she does all kind of digital marketing. They may be a good connection for one another. But if I never asked the question,
Yes. Yes.
I wouldn't have been able to step in and then be that connector because introverts are connectors by like nature because
Yeah.
we're listening.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just gives you another way to navigate the networking space without feeling so awkward.
And you really touched on something there with the networking because I mean, there was a post that I saw on Threads about one way to keep an introvert from coming to an event is having bad parking because we will find any excuse.
Ooh.
And in New
Because I'm about
Orleans,
to turn around and
for
go
real, I
home.
mean, but I
I
have,
already, I already had to talk myself into here. I
yes,
am turning around and going home if there is nowhere
right.
to park
We don't need excuse. You know what I
at
mean? That'd be
all.
one thing. But I push for, introverts to go to those networking events. And I remember writing a blog about this because it was like, you go there with this strategy.
Right.
Okay, meet three people, collect cards, follow up 24 hours later, and circle the room, two or three times. But sometimes I'll say I'll come early or I'll come maybe half an hour into it when more people have shown up. But I think walking in with an objective helps because at
Yes.
least you can say, okay, I got here. I have three connections at least. I have, my work cut out for me to follow up and try to schedule a coffee. No hard selling because that's just not something I mean, I'm honest with you,
Mm-mm.
I don't even feel right trying to sell. And I can close like anybody, but I close
But yeah, it's just,
after, you go through that
it
whole
feels
process.
grimy, it feels a
Right,
little
right.
grimy. It
I
just
like,
does.
yeah, I like the soft close where it's like, so do you have any other reservations? Do you have any questions from this point on? Okay, now do you want to
Right.
sign on? But I prefer that versus, but if some people just do it now, you want to, or do you want the product or the service or not? Nobody's going to do that. And I've never been one to do that, but I know like I will feel good about myself if I go to a networking event I can say objection, my whole objective has been met and I can leave now.
Right.
Whether I was
Right.
there an
Because
hour, yeah,
especially setting those number of people to meet because
yes.
as introverts it's very easy. Like I went to an event last night and
Mhm.
I had a long day, and so I did not set those objectives like I would normally,
Mhm.
make sure I meet at least three people. I found me a little spot, and I mean, but I
Yeah.
did engage with
Yeah.
people, but I'm saying that to say as introverts, it's easy for us to fall into that way of like, wallflower,
Yeah.
and
Yes.
that defeats the point of being there. So
Right.
we do have to, like with all things, I think embrace who you are,
Mm-hmm.
and then where you have to compensate, right? You don't have to be different. You don't have to work the entire room, and you don't have to do that, but set yourself, know that, okay, I'm doing this for a reason. I
Yeah.
have an objective, and I'm being very thoughtful about it.
Mm-hmm.
One of the ways that, this is just another little secret tip for the listeners, that I do that in times, especially if I'm in a space where I don't really know anybody and I'm like,
Right.
okay, I'm just going in blind. There are other introverts in the room.
That's true. You're not the only one.
There are other
Very true.
introverts in the room. And
Mm-hmm.
so what I do when I'm like, okay, well, I don't really know anybody here, I'll surveil the room,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll look for someone who I think looks like they're uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
And I will go over to them, and I'm going to be that welcoming, like, because I know that you're feeling the same thing that I'm feeling.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to psych yourself up. You don't know, anybody. So I'm going to go walk over and be like, "Hey, and talk to that person and get them talking." And so now you have a networking buddy. One, you met one of your people.
Exactly.
Two, because you two just met each other, you can go meet new people together. And
Team
sometimes
up.
as introverts, we don't like talking about ourselves. So
Mm-hmm.
this is my new friend so and so, and they do X, Y, and Z. So you can use little tricks and tips
Mm-hmm.
to make it more comfortable as an introvert. You don't have to convert yourself into
Exactly.
an extrovert.
Because I think that's probably one of the biggest things. And I would say, even as Black women, and whether you're a business owner in a setting, whether you're on a board, or you're working within a team, a lot of times there's that stigma that we're supposed to come in and just have this big personality. And when they see that we're not, who they feel we should be, and it's really hard because
It makes people uncomfortable.
exactly, like, what, like, I remember when I was working in a job and it was like, you're not being yourself. And I said, no, I am being myself. This is
This is
who I
me.
am. I'm not, I don't know, I'm not sure exactly who you thought I was, but I'm exactly the same way I was when I interviewed for this job. I've been here, XYZ amount of, time, whatever, but this is me. So what's
Like
the problem?
I met you several years ago, and we
Exactly.
slowly got to know each other over time, just of
Yeah.
seeing each other at events and places. And I can say hands down, Sharika has been the same person from the first time I met her. Like I feel like we know each other better than we did
Mhm.
when the first day we
So, so
met. But
mhm.
what you see is what you get. Like
Yeah.
everybody is not like everybody's not like the big over the top personality,
Yeah.
and I can be at times, and then at other times I'm so like quiet, but my quietness disturbs people.
Yes.
And
Oh my God.
that's so
Yes.
weird to me because their loudness doesn't disturb me. Like, I mean, be
Yeah,
you if that's who you are.
exactly.
Like,
It never,
enjoy that, do that.
it never bothered me ever. I mean, I find that a lot of times, they say introverts need an extroverted friend because sometimes, I don't feel, sometimes, I mean, I feel like talking. They do all the talking. And then when I
Right,
want to interject, I will. But it's
right.
like they pretty much have the conversation going in times where I just don't feel like it. Now, when I do feel like it, it's great. If it's a topic or something that I'm passionate about, oh yeah, I can talk for hours.
For
But
hours.
yeah, but if I've done and we've already exceeded the small talk limit, which I give it like 2 minutes, after that, I'm like zoned out. I'm ready to
Look,
change the
I'm just like,
subject.
okay,
Yeah.
yes, it is hot outside. Yes, I am busy. You are busy. Yes. Like,
Right.
give me something interesting. Like,
Oh,
but
crazy.
some people can just do that. Like I had a coworker once, And I mean, she would literally be on the phone with her mother, like from the time she got to work all the way to the end of the day. And I'm like, what are y'all talking about like that? Like, what is
Yeah.
that that you could talk about like for hours
Okay.
on end?
I will say this because I'm like one of like five, and I'm gonna say five is generous in my family. Introverts, because they're very extroverted. My mom's side, I'm thinking about them, really both sides. But her side is really funny because they would have this prayer line, and every time they're like, "Well, I thought I heard Sharik," and every time I talk, someone else would talk.
Right.
Every time I'm like, "I'm here," then someone else is talking. So I was like, you know what? I just give up because it seems like I'm here, but it's like there's always someone coming in to chime in at the same time, So it's like you just kind of get used to it. Like, you know what? They'll figure it out whether or not I was
Right.
out.
Like, okay. No, I went
Yeah.
to like a workshop once, and I forgot what the like little acronym was, but basically, when they were doing the house rules, they said if you are a person that tends to talk a lot,
Yeah.
think about falling back.
Oh.
And if you are a person who doesn't tend to speak as much,
Hmm.
make an effort to speak up.
I like
And I had never heard that, had that as a part of the house rules before,
Mhm.
but I thought it was so beautiful because, again, as introverts and observers, we see
Mhm.
and we watch things, and it's like once you're in a group, you already know, like this person ain't gonna never shut up the whole time. Like, you're in a
Oh,
class, and every time there's a time to talk, this person is raising their hand, or they talking when it's not even time. You're not the instructor. Like, can you please, like,
yeah.
we came here to learn from the person who who's teaching the
Yeah, and
class.
it's like, do you want attention or do you actually, are you here to learn? Are you here to be the star of the show?
Right,
Like,
right.
go up and
So
teach.
it's
Right.
like, so that there's always that person in the room.
Hmm.
And then there's always the person in the room that's never, like, no matter what, going to raise their hand, right?
Yes.
And for me, when I'm like instructing or facilitating, I always want to hear what that person has to say, because that person usually has like the most profound
Hmm.
thing to say, but they're not either, like you said, they've been cut off every time they try, or they're just like not seen in the space.
Right.
They're not going to ever say anything, and there's a lot of hot air being talked around the room, but that's the person that probably has the answer, the solution to whatever is going on.
That's kind of like what we talked about before when I was telling you about when I was at Duke and I was one of the managers and we would have our weekly check-ins and the chair, who was very, very intimidating. He would go around to every manager, what are your updates? What are your updates? And I always had to make sure I had something written down ahead of time. I could never walk into that meeting with nothing because sometimes he'll pop something on us like, there's a new machine coming in. We didn't know what room to put it in. This is when I was at Duke Radiation Oncology. And so I handled a lot of the operations. So what do y'all think? And everyone just kind of blurting out something just to blurt it out. Right. And my mind, we talk about this. I'm thinking about, okay, well, if we do this, then that. If we go over here, then let me see, then this may happen. Maybe it's a, issue of flow between the patient getting in and out. I'm thinking about patient times and all these different times. So I'm not just going to blurt something out just to say I contributed to the meeting. I would rather wait to our one-to-one. I mean, I may offer something, but it's nothing that I would say, well, this is kind of what I'm thinking, but let me think a bit deeper about
Right.
this. Then by the time we got to my one-to-one with him, I would come to him with all these different angles, or at least this is what I came up with after I stopped and I really analyzed the situation. And I see now this is where the machine should go. And this
Right.
is why. Versus
Right.
just trying to show, okay, I checked my box, I contributed to the meeting.
Right. And that's what I think it is. It's like a check of a box, like,
Right.
like, there's this. episode of Living Single when they go on like a talk show and they
Yeah.
bring Max on the stage and Max says something and the host said, "Well, what are you really saying?" She said, "Well, you got me up here, so I felt like I
Right.
needed to say something." And I think that that's a lot of times what's happening is like people feel like they
Mm-hmm.
need to say something, but
Yeah.
introverts are comfortable with not. They're comfortable with silence. They're comfortable with, like I don't have to be seen in that way. Like I don't have to be seen as the person that's always saying something, but I want to make sure what I do say is thoughtful.
Yes. I think that's our biggest fear is sounding like an idiot.
That part,
Yeah.
it is. I mean,
Right.
I can speak for myself.
Me
I can
too.
speak for myself
Yeah.
wholeheartedly. I
Mhm.
don't want to sound dumb. And since I don't
Yeah.
want to sound dumb, I want to make sure that what I'm saying makes sense. And it might make perfect sense, but I'm just like, let me run through this real quick to
Mm-hmm.
make sure because it sounds right to me in this moment, but also there's just a little bit too much going on. The
Yeah.
busyness sometimes is distracting. I don't know if that's my introversion or my ADHD, but regardless, like sometimes when it's too much going on, it's like I just need
Yeah.
everything to like pause for a
Moment.
moment
Mm-hmm.
so that I can really think about this in
Yeah.
the right way and not just allow that impulse to
Mm-hmm.
drive what I'm saying. So we don't want to like mess up. But
Now,
I
no,
mean,
big on
I done
that.
been in some situations. I'm like, well, you just say any old thing, just because, like,
Okay, because I'm like, why did I say that? You
like,
know, like what in the world was I thinking? But yeah.
but it's so yeah. I think that we are very thoughtful in that way. We don't want to misstep. And I mean, sometimes in life, yes, you have to kind of put yourself out there. And, that's something that we have to balance, right?
Mhm.
But still, there's a value in how we look at things because we're much more holistic in how we look at, like, not just the thing, but the implication of
Right.
the thing.
We see the whole 180, 360 of it. We're not just looking at the short term. We're looking at
No,
not just A, we're looking at B through Z,
right.
you know.
Because it's like, okay, well, we can do this solution, but then, I mean, we all the way down to, well, how the janitor gonna get to the, like, clean this
Clean
space
around the
if we put
machine.
it, like we're that far in when we're thinking about things. And so it takes us a little longer sometimes to flesh it out, or we, like you said, we can give like a partial, this is my thought, but let me go sit with this for a second because I want to make sure that there are no other negative impacts to, or if they are they worth the impact?
Right. Is it a benefit to this? If we take a little bit of loss, maybe it's a temporary loss or something like that. I want to talk about like us as CEOs of our businesses because we have a lot of business owners that listen here and looking, and some of them may be introverts themselves. And sometimes you may feel like maybe you're shrinking, or maybe you've managed how to get around it like we have. Maybe you no longer look at yourself as, man, I wish I can do this or that. Because for me, I think as a CEO, even running a business and representing my brand, it's just very important that I make sure that I'm always pushing myself to try something new, like speaking. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
as a kid, I couldn't even do my darn Easter speech. That was like torture. And I mean, my aunt used to give us like $5 for the best speech because my family, of course, had to turn it into like a talent show. We couldn't get up and do
Uh-huh.
our speech, right? We had to be extra. So, I'm sitting here trying to do this speech and get it over with. And that was like torture for me every year. So up to now, I'll get up on stage and give, one of my talks like it's nothing because I had to get out of that discomfort and that your mind tells you to run. But no, sometimes you have to say, no, I'm going to do this,
Right.
because the benefits of it really outweigh the fears, or it's not so much the fears or the discomfort, that pit in your stomach, like someone wants me to lead or talk, or I just recently emceed a breakfast and I was like, yeah, I'll do it. But in my mind, I'm like, oh gosh, I never emceed anything before. Like, what in the world did I just say yes to? But it went great,
Yeah.
but that's just one of the things that I would tell anybody. You got to get yourself in those uncomfortable positions and try, and I can tell you one thing, I've never felt like a fool or looked like a fool
Mm-mm,
giving a
mm-mm.
talk, whether it's in person or virtual. That's what your mind's telling you. You
And I mean, and you say you like you've never looked like a fool, and it just brought me back to what we were saying right before that. We are always thinking of plan A, B, C, and D, right?
Mhm.
So you already are, kind of like geared that way that you're going to protect yourself. Like
Yeah.
I know at this point, because I'm this, like, you said about not being able to like do the Easter speech. I didn't talk to anybody except for my mom until I was 6 years old. And now, I'm a speaker and I, host a podcast and I, do all of these like very visible things.
Mhm.
But I know what it takes to get up there and me feel comfortable, right? As far as like that prep work that it takes for me to get up there and feel comfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you first start doing these things that you're not used to doing, it's going to feel uncomfortable. Any new thing feels uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But I think where we like misstep sometimes as introverts is trying to do the thing under the guise of an extrovert, right? We still
Mhm.
have to bring our own flair to the situation. Like,
Yeah.
you know, I love when I do events to be interactive. Like I absolutely love it. But again, it's that listening to people,
Mhm.
hearing people. So it's bringing your own talents to a different arena.
Yeah, and I'm
When
glad. Yeah, I'm so glad you said that because that's how my talks have evolved. Because first it was just me talking, but I'm like, I'm going back to when I was at Pfizer doing the sales rep thing. Now I'm asking questions because it's like someone in the audience can say something that can trigger something that, man, I knew and didn't even realize that can really help, them at that point in time or help even whatever it is I'm talking about. So if you don't give people that opportunity, then you can really have, a whole hole in your presentation where you really could have gone a little bit deeper. So I love to ask those engagement questions, because it number one, it unarms me because I'm feeling like, okay, now they're talking too. And now it's not just me
right,
here with this microphone, we're having a discussion, a collaboration. I don't feel as nervous anymore.
right. And but that is just leaning into our strengths. Like one of my biggest things, like I work with imposter syndrome, and a big part of that is trying to be something else.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not that person. I'm just not. That's not who I am. So that's not going to feel good to me. Like or I don't like being the center of attention. Like I
Right.
still
Right.
don't. Like even as
Yeah.
a speaker and all those things, I really don't like being the center of attention. So, like you said, me just standing up there and just talking
Yeah.
for an extended period of time with no like back and forth is
It's hard. Even like when
it
I was teaching, and that was hard because these students were like just I'm like, are y'all even alive? Are y'all even
right. Wake up. Are you
and
here?
some were asleep? But I mean, that's just a big thing is the audience participation really helps to kind of push and everything.
Right.
So I want to talk about some of the things that some of the biases, like we kind of,
Oh,
title
Jesus.
says it all. We're introverts in an extroverted world, right?
Yes.
So, a lot of times we have to deal with some biases. At one time I was at a dinner and there was another, Black woman who was there and she was very extroverted and we are all just having a good time. And then one of the guys afterwards went over and hugged her and says, "She's my favorite. Sorry, Sharif." And I was like, okay.
Oh. Oh, look, okay.
And I was like, okay, and kept walking. That's nice. I wasn't vying for your attention anyway. I'm over here being me.
Right.
And I don't know if this ever happened to you, but being in a social setting like a dinner, if someone ever like called out, "Hey, you're not talking a lot.
Mm-mm.
How everybody's
Mm.
talking and you're not."
Because I don't have anything to say at this moment.
Right. And here's the kicker is that you're over there across the table and there's people to my left and my right who I've engaged with. But should I have called you to say, "Hey, look at me. I'm talking to this one and that one." That's
Right. Like,
cool.
are you keeping score? I didn't know we were
Yeah.
like keeping score, or it just also depends on my energy like I told you last night, I went to a networking event and I was just, it had been a long day and I did not have the performative energy. I just did
Yeah.
not.
It is.
But there were several people there that I knew,
Mm-hmm.
and we had some great conversations, and honestly there's nothing wrong with that because
Yeah.
that's still furthering those connections, right? But as another person I knew came in, I'm like, hey, do you two know each other? And introducing them to each other. So it's, like the old people would say, it's more than one way to skin a cat. And we get, we too quiet. We don't, a lot of times they think we soft.
Oh, that's a big one. I've had several times where I've been in like coaching programs and the speaker who was very extroverted. Now some of y'all little introverts over there who was scared hide in the corner. I had to correct people several times to say no. Introverts does not mean that we're like little scared people. It just means that we process information differently, which is
Right,
totally different than what you're trying to say here. We're
right.
not soft. We're just basically taking it in, and we have limits on how much we're going to take in before we have to go and recharge. That's it.
That's it, and that's all. And
Yeah.
it's just, I find this is a word that it took me a while to really digest.
Mhm.
And I'm owning it at this point, but I also find it in my other fellow introverts.
Mhm.
Wisdom.
Yes.
Introverts tend to be wise.
Hmm.
And, I am probably a talkative introvert in the sense that, like, when I am talking, I'm talkative. Now, when I'm quiet, it is what it is.
Right.
But, um, usually, the quieter the introvert is, the more wisdom, like, that will like come from them. You know, my uncle said this about my mom, right? And I love getting stories about my mom since she like passed when I was very young. He
Hmm.
said that, she was always like very, very quiet, very stoic, but whenever she said something, it was the most impactful.
Yeah.
And I think that that's how introverts are. We take things in and we take in so much information and so much data, and we process it back out
Hmm.
in a packaging that, you know that it can't be duplicated, right? Like, we were kind of like AI before AI was AI.
Right. Right.
We were scouring, the web for all the information and putting it back out in a digestible format. That is what introverts bring to the table. And I just really hate that we live in a world where it's like either or,
Right.
like
Right.
both, introvert and extrovert has its benefits. Both of them have their shortcomings, but we need to value them
Hmm.
for what they are.
Yeah.
And not, like you said, it's always those little snide comments. Oh, you introverts. Oh, well, you got to get over it. That's the one for me.
Oh,
That's the
oh God.
one
Yeah.
for me. And I've been in a lot of spaces where that's the advice. Like, if the person who's in charge is an extrovert, the advice is to get over it. And I'm like, that is the point where I'm about to raise my hand because I need to address the introverts in the room. You don't have to get over it.
Right.
Work within your strengths. You
Mhm.
don't, I'm a creative. My husband's an engineer. I don't look half the stuff he's talking about. I have no clue what he's talking about, but that is his
Right.
strength. And
Yeah.
so I was telling someone just earlier today, if I get a new device or something like that, I'm about to open it and I'm doing this and that. And he was like, don't, he's like, just give it to me while it's still in the box.
Right.
Because I'm touching it, I didn't lost parts, I didn't everything. And he's like, they had instructions. But that's not me, and that's not how I'm
Mhm.
going towards it. But that's his strength. So when there are things that are his strength, I've learned to give that to him because that's his strength. There's certain things that I'm going to do better than him, then I'm going to take on those things. I think that's the same thing, you
Yeah.
know, for those managers out there that don't know what to do with their introverts, stop trying to make them extroverts.
Mhm.
We do not want to share a fun fact or a tip. Like we don't
Oh gosh, those icebreakers and things like that. Yeah.
we don't want play. We really don't want play because we sitting up there trying like the hardest to come up with something to say so that y'all can stop talking to us.
They come up
But
with
we
it
may
like 2 days
not,
later. Like,
huh?
like 2 days later, you came up with it. Like, and now
Yeah, you'd be
I
like,
quit.
oh yeah, remember that time? That was interesting.
Like,
Like, because we don't, that's not how we think, right? And so, just understand that,
mhm.
but understand that when you're looking for somebody to give you big picture answers and big picture like results, if you're looking for somebody to be a relationship builder,
Yeah.
like, because extroverts are very good at attracting people.
Yes. Yes.
Introverts are very good at retaining people.
Yes. So it's just all about how to use each different person, especially like if you're managing your team and you're looking to hire, where could this person's strengths can be best utilized over here?
Right.
Maybe have someone extroverted in sales,
Right.
introverted more likely probably in marketing. You have extroverted marketers too, but they work together and they complement each other
All right.
because they really kind of vibe off of that. They know exactly what the company needs and they can better communicate. But see, that's the manager's job, when you're running your business, even when hiring people. I like to talk about not only, okay, yes, your skills are important, that's great, but I also want to know, how do you work within a team?
Right.
Because you can have someone who has great skills, but they're just like one of those loner types that just don't really engage, and their job does require them to talk with, for me it's the web designer, or talk with the ads person, or talk with the social person, but you have to be able to at least do that.
Right.
And so it's important that, yeah, skills are great, but it has to be a great fit and a good
Yeah.
mix across the board.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm a big believer of higher personality train skill. Like they, of course, on their resume, they have like the bases that you
Right.
need, but it's that personality that's gonna make a difference. And
Yeah.
especially like you said, for a team. And I think for the managers of said team is also understanding how to best meld that team. Like in the sense of, um, I'm a, excellent communicator, but I really like I don't need the 14 meetings. Like
Oh
we
gosh.
don't need to have 14 meetings. Like, because at that point now I'm disgusted with all of y'all and I don't want to talk to anybody. So, like you have to understand how to bring that out of people. And some people enjoy meetings, usually the people that don't do work. So,
Just talk and not have to do anything, right?
right,
That,
like some
yeah,
people enjoy them and, whether they're introverted or extroverted, like just knowing that mix of like, okay, where's the sweet spot where these people are communicating well.
yeah. That's a big thing, because I know that I'm looking at people, and I just think back also like to when I was in corporate, and how you always just had those people who just want to run the meeting and keep it lasting longer and longer. And that was so, I mean, in Pfizer, we had those, like it was like 2 or 3 days, they called it a POA, point of action meeting. And it was torture. I would come home and just go straight to the bed, because half the time it's somebody running their mouth and trying to make the meeting go longer than it had to go, because you want to prove some type of point about whatever it is, about yourself, whatever. And it's like, it's done. And even now when I work on teams, because sometimes I'm working as a subcontractor to another agency on something, it could be web or social or graphics, and sometimes it just goes on and on and on. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. But I mean, I'm always gonna put my professional face on, but it's like knowing whether or not this should be an email,
Right.
or should this be something that
My
we actually
goodness.
need, right? Do we
I
really?
think it like time wasting drains us.
It does, because it's like I'm thinking of things that I could be doing right now that's productive, but I'm not, because I'm listening to someone just rattle off.
Right. And it's not
Possible being done. Yeah.
is we value valuable conversation. So like that
Right.
same meeting could have been 3 days long. And if it was like packed full of like valuable information, we would actually be charged, like,
Exactly.
but
Yeah.
but when you just I'm like, so I mean you might as well be like the people on Charlie Brown. Womp 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 womp.
Yes.
Like we've been just saying that for like 3 hours now. Like y'all didn't say everything that could possibly be said.
And then you have dinner that night. So you go back to your room for an hour, and then you have to go back and be on again for dinner. I remember those meetings, and it was like, oh my
Ooh,
gosh. Now it's a lot more, relaxing because I don't feel as much as that is on the line or
right.
that I have to be on. Because one thing I will say about being, working for myself versus someone else, I just feel more in control of the
Yes.
situation. I don't feel as if I have to be something that I don't. Like the guy
Right.
who said that whole thing about the other person being the favorite. I'm like, okay, that's great. That's nice.
Right.
You know?
Right. But yeah, when you're in that working environment, a lot of times
Right.
people try to make you then be that person. And
Yeah.
I'm not that person. They're doing a very good job of being that person.
Hmm.
And I'm doing a very good job of being me.
Right. Being my
And and that brings great things to the table. I mean, like I cannot think of a position that I left that did not leave a hole.
yeah.
So I know that I bring great things to the table, but I may not be the thing that you want me to be.
Hmm.
But I think that that is for, you know, all of us in leadership positions to take a step back and figure out why is it that you feel like everyone should be this carbon copy as opposed to being a dynamic team with everyone being able to like really be themselves.
Yeah, I think that all depends on the environment of the company or the business. When you're looking to bring people in, like one time I had to hire a nurse manager, and the guy before her was amazing, but he just wasn't that good on structure and keeping everybody's licenses on task,
Mhm.
making sure everybody had their stuff, important things that can, get the whole hospital, sued and
Right,
make a patient a millionaire, right? Things like that, fell through the cracks. The person I hired, I interviewed her and I just knew this is the person. She was introverted, but she was big on structure. She came highly recommended. The other person with the big personality was the one everybody wanted,
right,
but she had the shady past. And
right,
when I checked her references, it was like a big drawn out explanation. And I'm like, wait, 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 what do we have to talk about? Like there's something there. And it made me feel like I had to investigate a bit more, and I did, and I just didn't like what I heard. But I had someone here who already had things done. She didn't have the big personality, but she got everybody in shape. And guess what? That was about almost 10 years ago, and she's still there.
right,
I left a long time ago.
right. But is the thing is that did her job require the big personality?
Right. I'm thinking nurse manager, you're there to handle the nurses, make sure they're running effectively between the two clinics that have been fighting and button heads, and you know what to do. And you want to make sure nurses, look, your license is coming up. I need to see your certifications and whatnot. Hello, Miss Ma'am. That's what we needed. You don't, I mean, let's
Right.
try this one to get sued. You know what I mean?
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
Like, that's what I find so interesting is that people don't think about, like, people think about this ideal of what they think a great person is, right? And the other lady might have been a great person to go out to drinks with or whatever, that was, right? But at the end of the day, that's the person, like you said, that you needed in that job. That's the person that's gonna go, put their head down, go get their work done, and make sure that it's in order. That's
Exactly.
what you needed. Like
Yeah.
it didn't matter. I mean, as long as she didn't like have a nasty personality, outside of that, it really didn't matter.
Mhm.
And earlier you were talking about like the negative things people say about introverts. One of them is that we don't have personalities.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Which is like you have obviously not taken time to, you don't really know. I'm thinking like, okay, how to say you don't know an introvert without saying you don't know an introvert,
That part.
or the people who have just been able to show who they are without having to do a whole lot. But no, there are introverts who you respect and know every day. Our former president, Barack Obama, introvert,
Right.
right? He knows how to be on when it's time to be on, but he also is very reserved when,
Correct.
I guess for those around him in his personal life or whatever. But that's fine. As long as you know when it's time to be on and
Right.
do what you
And
got
you
to
can
do.
step up how you need
Yeah.
to step up, but also, like catch us after dark. We have
Yeah.
personalities. We probably just didn't click with you like that. Like, if
Yeah.
you don't know that an introvert has a personality, they might
You
not like
haven't.
you.
And maybe, and a lot of times with us, we're very intuitive.
Yes.
We can
So
tell
we
whether or
like,
not, yeah, we know if we want to mesh with you or not. And
mm,
if you're not somebody that we're going to mesh with, then maybe that's why you're walking around thinking that. Because someone else that we vibe with, we can be sitting here talking for hours. You
no, one of my
know?
good friends, she used to say we used to work together, we ate lunch together and stuff like that. And one day she looked up at me, she said, I could tell when you don't like somebody. And she said, because like when you are with people you're comfortable with, she wasn't wrong. When
Yeah.
you're with people that you're comfortable with, she's like, you're very open, you're very like, you're having conversation, you're laughing, you're joking. She
Yeah.
said the second somebody comes around that you're not comfortable with, like most people won't pick up on it because everybody else is still talking. She says you just get quiet.
Yeah.
And that's how I am. If I feel like if I don't trust your vibe, like I'm like, like you
Yeah.
don't get to know that side of myself.
Yeah. It's a withdrawal. Like, okay, I'm gonna just go ahead and slowly ease my way out, or oh, there's someone over there. Let me go check, let me go say hi to them.
Right.
Something like that. You find a reason just to kind of disengage and go on and do something else, you know.
Yeah, but it's
But
it's not
yeah.
that we don't have personalities. It's just we probably like different stuff. We probably, like different people. We just
Yeah.
roll in different circles. It's not like we just sitting over here dry and we never talk to anybody and never do
Fine.
anything.
That's not it at all. So that's something that I'm glad you brought that up because that's not something that we do. It's just more or less we're not going to have we're just not going to fit the mold that you may think that we should fit.
Right.
This is who we are. We're presenting ourselves, and that's it. It's honestly at this point in my life, at my age, my big age, take it or leave it. Seriously.
That's it.
You
And that's really what I would love for any listener that is an introvert and is struggling with it
Mm-hmm.
to understand, embrace being you. There is so much beauty in who you are, and embrace that, and things get easier when you start to lean into who you are. Like you said, it is a little more challenging when you're in a workplace environment because you have other like factors, but even there, I think that there are conversations that can be had that are like, hey, you know, these are things that make it a little bit easier for me in the space. I do have these things to contribute. And
Right.
actually, like you said, like going into that meeting with that list, documenting those things, because we're not the person that's going to be like, I did this, I did this, I did this. We're not that person. We
Yeah.
just did it and kept moving.
Right. Right.
Um, but because people are rating you in that way,
Mm-hmm.
then start to be thoughtful about um giving the outputs that they're looking for, but
Mm-hmm.
not budging on changing who you are, because some of what makes you very good at what you do is tied into who you are. And you start changing that, and you're going to take away the thing that makes you the most special.
It is. And that's a hard job to have, is to always try to fake it. I talked to a manager one time and she said that's what she did. She until she got to where she wanted to be, she just faked it until she made it. And she was like, it's not easy. I would just go to my office and just totally just be drained after a whole day because all day long I was faking it. But she knew the environment was more leaning towards the extroverted personality. So she had to pretend. And I'm like, that's just a hard job, girl. On top of the work that you're being paid to do, now you're
Right.
also
You
trying to
you're
be
you're
something else.
doing you working two jobs.
Right, pretty much. And I was just like, okay, you're better than me because this is who I am. As long as I'm, performing, I'm giving the deliverables when they need to be delivered, I'm taking care of my job and going above and beyond. That's it.
That's what you're gonna get. Like that's what you're gonna
Right.
get because that's what you're paying me for. That's what you're gonna
Exactly.
get. But
Oh my
it's
goodness.
it is too much. It's
It
really
is.
too much.
It is. And I think even, if you're a board, I mean, if you're a CEO, you're going to sit on some boards more than likely. You're going to be active and you're going to feel that pressure, right? Because you feel like, sometimes we take on that responsibility to keep the conversation going. We take on responsibility for things that is not our job to do.
Right.
Everybody's
Right.
in the room. Why is it up to you to be the one to keep things going? Right? If
Yeah.
things, low off. And so a lot of times we put things on ourselves that we really should not do. And I just had to have that aha moment with myself not long ago. Like, it's not your job.
Right.
It's
Look, I'm sorry if I'm not presenting
right.
in that way, but that is not on the like I didn't see that on the job description anywhere, right?
Right.
And you said about like, as like the CEOs, it just made me think back to good to great. Like they
Mhm.
did, like a profile composite of all of those CEOs that went from good to great,
Mhm.
and the majority of them were introverts. And
Yep.
so it's also just changing that narrative as well. Like,
Mhm.
I think one of the things that we're told is that you have to be extroverted to be successful. And like you said, the president,
Yeah.
all of these like, amazing CEOs, a lot of people that we look at in the public light as successful are introverts at the end of the day. And we just don't have that conversation.
Yeah. And I think the benefit of being a CEO like this is that we can control our time. We
Yes.
can, and other than, versus being in a corporate environment where it's pretty much under the control of your company. Here, I know I can't do 5 days of calls and discovery calls. I have my times already set up in my schedule. I know here are those days. And then my Mondays and Fridays are my days for me to be in the office and catch up on anything that I need to get to. But I have those limits. And that's
And
already
you can
built into it.
control
Yeah.
that,
Right.
like that's the big crux of the like the calendar detox. Like you can control that. You control your calendar, right?
Right. Mhm.
And you can plan around that. And even in corporate space, I mean, some of it is outside of your control, but block off if you know you got a 3 hour meeting, block off the rest of the afternoon to do quiet work or to do something else that doesn't require that from you. Like if I know I have several like networking events in a particular week, there got to be a day between. I can't do back to I can't
Oh
do back to
no.
back.
Mm-mm. That is like that used to be my Thursdays, and I had to take over that because I was like, there's no way I can just go from Zoom to Zoom and then go to something in person after that. I'm drained.
I'm like
I
I
can't.
don't even want to see people. I don't want to see
Right.
people
I'm done
anymore. Like
people.
I'm just over it.
I'm
Like so
people
you
to
it's
know.
just protect
Yeah.
your peace.
Yeah.
Protect your peace and build it in a way that makes sense for you. Like there's no one size fits all anything.
Yes.
So like I was talking to somebody a little while ago and she was talking about like systems, and I'm a systems girl and I love systems, but she was talking about that, and she was like, and when you wake up in the morning and this, that, and the other, and I was just like, I hear you, but I know me. And
Yeah.
I know that I can be structured for like 3 days, and on the fourth day, I'm revolting. And I just know that about myself.
Yeah.
So I create my schedule in a way that works with that. So it's like certain
Mhm.
days are like very structured, and then other days are just open so
Yeah.
that I can, I'm still working, but I don't feel as rigid.
Yeah.
So that speaks to I have this creative side and this analytical side. So that speaks to that. But
Hmm.
whatever your makeup is, make your life
Yeah.
fit that. Don't try to change you to fit your life.
It is. I mean, and honestly, I don't know how old everybody is, but I'm just like, life is too short.
That
Be
part.
yourself, love yourself. If someone wants to say something silly to you, keep it moving because
Right.
obviously that person either doesn't know you or they're not trying to get to know you. And this point in time, if you're running your business and you're doing well and you're trying to grow, I would encourage you to take those, I call them like stretch exercises where you kind of grow and
Hmm.
just do something that you're uncomfortable with just for your own purpose, not being pressured into it, but
Right.
just learning something more about yourself.
Right.
But I definitely would just, would encourage anyone not to ever beat yourself up because you're not like this one or that one over there, because
Mm-mm.
it's not going to do you any good.
No. And the reason why they are being successful is because they are being themselves.
Exactly. You already know the formula. So don't feel bad, because I used to just really feel so horrible and feel bad about, gosh, I wish I can just be more whatever. But I'm like, so what? I don't
Mm-mm.
have to do,
Mm-mm.
any of that. I was, you take on more than you really should be taking on. And, in a whole social setting. No one is looking for you to stop and drop it or whatever it is they're thinking that you're supposed to be doing. They're looking for you to come and bring value at the
Right. And
day.
that's
Be
it.
productive.
And that's going to look different for different people,
Right.
right?
Hmm.
Everybody is not for you. That's another thing, to let go of that. And so sometimes it's not going to be a connect, it's not going to be a match, and that's okay.
Yeah.
There's somebody else, 3 feet away,
Hmm.
and that person may be the one that's a match for you. So find what works as well, because I've been in networking situations, and you New Orleans is small, so you go to networking situation, you're going to see some people that you've seen 1,000 times, and you're going to
Yeah.
see some people that might be brand new.
Hmm.
You might have met this person 4 times, and every time you meet that person, it seemed like you just met them for the first time because it didn't click,
Right.
because there was something off. Now, maybe one day something is going to click between you, and maybe it never will, but it's okay. It's
Exactly.
okay. There's somebody else that is meant for you
Hmm.
and that is designed for you. So I think we get a little too caught up in comparison.
Oh my gosh, that is probably one of the biggest killers of creativity and innovation. Because I remember that was me. I was, you try not to, especially when you're in group programs and you see someone is just taking off like a rocket. And you're like, oh my gosh, this person, because they, maybe it's their personality or something like that. You can't do that. It's hard, but you got to put those blinders on and just stay focused, because otherwise you're not gonna do anything. You're gonna get paralyzed.
Yes. Yes.
It will paralyze you. We call it comparatitis. Like,
Yes.
please.
No, it really
Yeah.
does,
But
because
yeah.
then you're standing still, or you're sitting
Mhm.
there trying to look like that person, talk like that person, act like that person. And that, one, that's exhausting, and two, you're never going to duplicate that, right?
Oh no.
And you also don't know what is going on with that person, because I've been in similar situations, and that person that went out the gate gangbusters, and then it's like, where are they now?
You know what? And I've had those moments where I would stop and look at people who I was in programs with, especially back in 2015-ish. And a lot of them are either not in business anymore, they've gone back to work. And I'm not saying any of those are bad things, but they're not even doing what you were doing when you first started out together.
No,
You're worried about them and
I
should
think like
worry about yourself. Yeah.
when we compare, this is what I say to my clients a lot of time, because in imposter syndrome, that comes up all the time, of this comparison.
Yeah.
When we compare, we're looking at someone else's highlight reel.
Hmm.
We know the full of ourselves. We know all the thoughts that we think
Yeah.
at 3 o'clock in the morning. We know everything about ourselves. We know every mistake we ever made. But what we're seeing of other people is just whatever's on the surface.
Yeah.
And so it's not even a fair comparison.
It,
So while that person may, like, especially to us as introverts, that person, has that magnetic personality and this, that, and the other, that's great. But that person may be wanting your centeredness.
mhm.
You know what I'm saying? So we all bring something to the table, and if we all show up as our authentic self, and then we work together,
Yes. Yes.
that's when things are like absolutely amazing, when we learn how to um work off of each other's strengths.
Hmm.
And then to me, it's like, I look at like my extroverted friends is like, I'm not trying to be you, but you challenge me to be a little more of something, right?
Right. Right.
And then I feel like I do the same to them. Like, they're not trying to be me, but I feel like I pull them a little more to the center, like, and that to me is what's beautiful, as opposed to us being like this versus that.
Yeah. And I think just put my marketing hat on. all of that can come out in your messaging. That's why I love personalization in marketing, social, web, everything, because you can attract your whole tribe of people that you like to work with by just having the messaging that is on point, that is authentic to who you are. You may think you're the only person in the world like that. No, there are so many people who appreciate your personality, appreciate your introversion because they know either they've been exposed to other introverts, they know the value that we bring to the table. You can have a whole client base of people who actually are attracted to that about you by
Yeah.
sharing that, being vulnerable, putting that into your marketing campaigns, your web, everything, because that's how people get a view of inside of who you are and they're able to relate a lot better. So I mean, my social, I'll just tell you everything about, boy, mom, whatever. I'm recently divorced, whatever, because that's who I am. That's my story.
Right.
It's what it is. And I know that it relates to other people. It's nothing, that I'm trying to hide, whatever, because it's something, I mean, honestly, you can find out anyway.
Right,
You know,
right. No, it's
it's
true. And I
not,
think that that's why, like a lot of times, like you were saying about these people that fall off, a lot of times it's because they were, putting up a facade and all
Mhm.
it took was for somebody to pull a thread and then
Yeah,
everything comes tumbling down. But if you're authentic, it's no thread. What you gonna
yeah.
tell
You
me?
don't, you don't have to be
You
on.
gonna tell me about something I recorded a video about? I mean,
Exactly. I mean, that's the beauty of it. If you are coming out the gate and putting yourself out there as yourself all times, continuity to cross all of your communication channels, you don't have to be on. You just
right.
walk up and wake up in the
Just
morning
be.
who you are, and that's it. And they will, so when someone meets you, they're not like, well, wait a minute, who are you? And who is this person that
Right,
I'm reading
right.
about online?
That's
You
not the
know,
same lady. Like that's not
it should
the same
flow.
lady.
Yeah,
But to your
super
point, just
natural.
spinning it on its head a little bit, right? The same point, you're also detracting those people when you're not showing up
Hmm.
like that as
Yeah.
your authentic self.
And yeah.
Like I remember my coach telling me, she was like, we went on a retreat and she was just like, so this person that's in front of me is not the person that I see on social media. This was several years ago. And I was just like, I don't know what you mean. And she was just like, she's like, you're witty, you're funny, you're there. She's like, I'm not getting that. And she used to say to a lot of us, because we were in a group coaching program, that we were too corporate. And coming from corporate, I was
Yeah,
like,
I heard that
is
too a
that an
lot.
insult? Because I don't know if that's an insult. And I
Yeah.
didn't get it.
Yeah.
And over time, it took a couple of years for it to really click to me what she was saying. But because I was coming from corporate where you had to, wear this mask, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
I was showing up in that way because that was the way that I understood you had to show up, right?
Right, right.
And so it wasn't until that really, really sunk into me that I'm like, now when I show up on social media, people are like, Danielle, if you don't get off my toes, Danielle, if like, because
Right.
I'm showing up more me, not the polished me. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, yes,
But
absolutely. Yeah.
that is detracting from your clients. Or even when I first started the balloon business, I wanted to hide behind the scenes. I'm an introvert.
Yeah.
My work speaks for itself. You ain't got to see me. I don't need to be at
Mm,
the forefront. And I met this lady at she was doing a panel and she was talking about, being the face of your brand. And I
hmm.
had heard it a million times before, but this was the first time that I heard it from a black lady, right? And it was like she went, like, I never met this lady before, but she ran down every objection that I had.
Hmm.
And I was like, oh well, let me just write this here down, because she didn't
Oh my
just
goodness.
destroyed all of the things that I had told myself about, hiding behind my business and how this didn't apply to me.
Right, right.
She destroyed that.
Mm,
But when I made that shift, the connection and relationship with my clients changed. sometimes we're putting up that guard,
Yeah.
and that guard is keeping our people from really connecting to us, right? Like there may be someone who is, they're like, well, I'm recently divorced too. Like, now they like, that's intriguing. That calls me in, not just that that's what's happening in your life, but that you're open about talking about that. And that makes them feel open about the situation, So it's all of those things that we are kind of taught against
Yes.
that we have to kind of unlearn, and then understand that the truer and most authentic that we can be, the better we can attract our people.
Yes, that is so true. And I'm glad you said that too, because it took me a while to take that corporate face off and just be comfortable just being Sharik everywhere, you know?
Right,
So that's really important for those who are looking to transition over to owning your business after leaving corporate. Just understand it's normal. It's totally
right,
normal. And if any of those who are in business have felt that way, and people have told you that, that's because you need to just kind of peel that off and just really show the real you, and that's totally fine. And people love, I mean, I think the more flaws they see, or not even flaws, but just
just
putting out their
realness.
perfect, yeah, real, not putting out the miss perfect, whatever, the more people are like, that's my person
Right,
versus everything perfect, and I think that people are realizing that now as they're putting out their content and putting out different, pieces of content, whether it's a video or blog or whatever it is, they're realizing that, the more imperfect I appear, the more people I attract.
right,
Yeah,
because that perfect version of you has so many walls.
it does. Yeah.
And then, like you were saying about the lady that like, faked it till she made it, like that philosophy, oh my God. Like, so you're living in that. So
Yeah.
now you're working so much harder.
Every day, 8 to 10 hours a day, being some
Like, you're acting, you're adding acting to your
exactly,
to
you might
your
as well
list
call
of
yourself an actress.
you're adding acting to your list of things. And so
Yeah.
now it's like keeping up that, that facade, and that is so much work.
It's
And to be honest, 9 times out of 10, people see through it anyway. Like, people are like, well, they gotta be experiencing this, so they gotta be, but when you show people that you're real, and I'm gonna put a little caveat on it,
yeah.
don't get too real. Some stuff just is not the time or
Yeah.
place. It's not that it's secret, it's just not,
Yeah. I
it
would.
didn't have nothing to do with what we was talking about here. Like it's not, save that for later.
Some people I
But
don't know much about. Yeah.
I mean, like because that confuses people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like if your page is about, your business, like I saw somebody's page and it was like they had maybe like a tax business or something, but then it was like selling dogs or something. And I was like,
Oh,
this
okay.
should be two different
Right. Get another page for that.
this should be two different pages because I'm confused,
Yeah.
but so there is a time and a place. But that being said, you should be able to be comfortable to be that real version of yourself in all of those times and places. You should be
Mhm.
able to, show up and represent your business as a human being, not as a caricature or a robot, or like just show up as you, and let people connect.
It's very important because, I mean, I'm just telling you right now, someone who used to be little Miss People Pleaser and whatever, and who used to hate the introversion, my own introversion. I mean, before I embraced it, it was hard. And I found now I was like, oh goodness, I can breathe.
Right.
This is just me, and that's it. I'm unapologetically me. And I honestly don't really care if you don't like it. I mean, that's just how it is.
I'll tell you, that's the like the best place ever to be.
Yeah, I can,
And I don't talk about it much except with other
yeah,
people that know what I'm talking about. But
right.
when you get to the point where you just don't give a
Yeah,
my goodness, it's so freeing,
it is.
because it's like I don't care what anybody else thinks in that regard. Like this is who I am. And there are people that absolutely love it, and I'm sure that there are people that aren't. But it's okay.
Yeah,
It's okay. You can't like, you I recovering people pleaser over here as well. But you can't get caught up in all of that because, my grandmother used to say that, they talked about Jesus Christ, so who are you?
exactly.
And that's the reality of it.
Yeah,
Like,
everybody gets it. Everybody's going, if he got
it's
it,
nothing that
there's
you're gonna
nothing else.
do
Yeah,
that's gonna absolve you from it, right? So you might as well do what you wanted to do anyway.
exactly. And so, I mean, that's just, I think if you get nothing else from this discussion, be yourself,
Yes.
regardless of how you're presenting your business, introvert, because that it really is not something to be looked down upon. It is something
Mm-mm.
that you should be very proud of. And it says a lot about you as a person, as a business owner. Then, we can talk all day. Because this is such a good topic. And just in general, every time we talk, we're like, girl,
I'm
what
no, I'm
time is
like, where did the
it?
time go?
I
But
know,
but
but
that's
it's so
also a
good. Yeah.
introvert myth is that we
Yeah.
don't ever talk. No, we just save it for the things we enjoy talking about.
Exactly. So, I mean, I just want to thank everyone for tuning in. And I hope that this gave you some insight, gave you some inspiration, some confidence. If you were feeling some kind of way about yourself, if you have any questions, just leave those into the comments. Danielle, tell us where they can find you and how they can get in contact with you.
So you can find me at coachdannid.com. You can also find me on social media on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok at Your Workflow.
Awesome. And you know where to find me. My information is going to be on the screen as well as in the notes, and Danielle's will be there as well. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to, if you're watching us on YouTube, to like and subscribe to our channel and let us know some other topics that you would love for us to cover here on the Marketing Maven podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. And thank you, Danielle, for being our guest today. I appreciate it. I always love talking with you.
Thank you for having me.
All right.